a second. It's often said that God is great and God is awesome, but how great is He? How awesome is He? It's hard to relate to that because, unfortunately, we are so tied down by what we can see and feel and touch. And that's exactly the problem Israel had, right? Even though they saw all the miracles of God when they were delivered out of Egypt, they were bound up by what they could see, touch, and feel. So what did they do? They made themselves a golden calf. Because it was a God they could see and touch. It was something they could relate to. But unfortunately, the limits of our physical, natural realm and the things that we can relate to are so minuscule compared to the God that we serve. And how can we compare Him to the things that we see? Now, I'm going to show you a few slides here. And when you look at these things, you're like, wow, look at the size of that toad. Look at the size of that watermelon. Oh my gosh, what a huge cat, right? Those are the things that come to mind when you see these things. You think, oh wow, that is incredible, isn't it? But can any of these giant things compare to God, to our God, the God that we serve? Why is it that we're so amazed by things that are bigger than the norm? That one was for Caleb, but I don't see him anywhere today. Oh, there he is in the background. Okay. So if we saw that guy, that was the last slide, we'd say, man, that guy is huge, right? He's enormous. Look at the size of that beast. But is he really that big? Why are we so amazed by these things that we see that are bigger than the norm? Well, I'd like to explore that a little bit today. And we're just going to continue looking at a few things that we consider to be huge. One of which is our Canadian National Tower, the CN Tower. So the CN Tower was built in 1972. It took them 4 years to complete. And the complete height of the tower is 1,500 feet up to the roof. So that the observation levels that you can get up to is about 1,500 feet off the ground. And all the way to the top of the tower is 1,815 feet. So for years, this was the tallest freestanding building in the world, even taller than the Empire State Building. And for years, this has drawn tourists from all over the world to come and visit it, to come and stand up and see, wow, look at the view from up here. This thing is so high, right? People pay a fortune to go and eat in the revolving restaurant, which is at the uppermost level of the tower that you can go to. And they get a plate of food about this big for $300, but they say they enjoyed it because they were able to go up to the CN Tower. Next. If we look here at the Warsaw Radio Mast, this was the largest tower in the world for some time. Now, it's just a communications tower. All they do is broadcast radio signals from it, but it stands an incredible 2,120 feet high, or it used to at least, until it collapsed during a guy wire change. When they were changing the wires, they picked the wrong one, and the tower snapped in half and came crashing down to the ground. And that was pretty much the end of that tower. But things get even bigger than that. We have what we know of as the 7 wonders of the world. Well, why are they so wondrous to us, right? Why do we look at the Colosseums of Rome and think, oh, wow, look at the beauty in that architecture? Or we look at the Great Pyramid and we think, wow, geez, how did they build that thing? That's the thing that comes to mind. Everybody says that's incredible. Or the Great Wall of China, which is so huge you can see it from outer space when you're in orbit around the Earth. Why do these things amaze us? Stonehenge being another wonder, because it's built with these megalithic stones. Nobody knows how they were at that point in time able to move rocks that big without the kind of heavy equipment that we have now. The Taj Mahal, all built by hand, solid marble. The biggest sarcophagus in the world, I guess we could think of it as, right? But everybody goes from all over the world to visit these places, to see these things. And in the bottom corner there we have Machu Picchu, which is in Peru, which is also another amazing city because they built it out of megalithic stones as well. And somehow they were able to mold the stones together. Nobody can figure out how they were able to do that, because that type of stonework is just not possible today. But why are we amazed by all of these things? So I'm going to show you some of the modern wonders of the world. So now you're going to have to guess that wonder. And these ones are pretty obvious and easy to see. What do we have here?
Empire State.
The Empire State Building is one. And what's the other? Thank you, the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, what's so amazing about these two buildings? It made the seven wonders, or the seven modern wonders of the world. And every day, or every year, the Empire State Building sees over 2 million visitors. When you calculate that, that's over 5,600 people roughly a day. Why does this stuff draw so much attention from us? Because somewhere inside of man, there is some desire in us to be a part or identify with something that is great. Right? And every great accomplishment one man makes, another man tries to go even farther. Because of all the things I've shown you, we have the granddaddy of them all, which is presently the Burj Dubai Tower, which stands an incredible 2,723 feet tall. Office space in this wonderful building is available for the low price of $4,000 a square foot. And I'm sure they have no problem leasing it out. But why is it that people spend billions and millions of dollars on these things? Well, just like the days of the Tower of Babel, we all aspire to make a great name for ourselves, make our mark on the earth, to say, look, we are bigger than, we are better than, we are the best. We always desire a prestigious job, a prestigious position. If you can't make that, then you buy yourself a nice car, nicer than all the friends that you know that have one, or you buy a faster motorcycle than your buddy does or your buddy has, because you're always aspiring to be greater than. Well, let's start looking at a few things, such as first the definition of awesome. Okay, we say that word awesome all the time, but I think we abuse that word, because awesome means extremely impressive or daunting, inspiring great admiration. So when we look at this tower, does this inspire great admiration? Yeah, for some people it does. But is this as big can get? When we look at the word great, it says of extent, an amount or intensity considerably above the normal or average. Yeah, I'd say a 2,700 foot tower is above the normal or average, right? Very large and imposing, used to express surprise or admiration. Of ability, quality, or eminence considerably above the normal or average, sorry, there's missing in space there, and a very good or satisfactory or excellent. But do we think of all these things when we use the words great to describe our God, or when we use the words awesome to describe our God? We use those words every day in things that we see outside in the streets in our everyday life. And then we use it to worship God. So are we really aware of how great or awesome God is? So I want us to explore some of God's greatest creations so that we can see how great of a God we serve. So the first one I'm going to start with here is Mount Everest. Mount Everest stands 29,029 feet above sea level. So often we look at it and we think, wow, this is the highest and biggest thing in the entire world, right? I figured I'd go big or go home. I'd start with the greatest thing that we all know on the earth. But is Mount Everest really that great? Because it's been summited, while the record for the most amount of summits is 21 times. The youngest person ever to summit Mount Everest is 13. And the oldest person ever to summit Mount Everest is 77 years old. So if a 77-year-old man can conquer it, then probably not that great, right? Not that awesome. So I think we've got to go a little bit bigger. So the next thing I thought of was the earth. We all know, see, touch, and handle the earth because we walk on it every day. We jump in a plane, we fly around it, and we all have some idea of how large the Earth is. So the Earth, a few statistics. The Earth is 13,000 kilometers in diameter. It moves or orbits around the sun at a rate of 29.78 kilometers per second. Now, if you convert that to kilometers per hour, that's 107,200 kilometers per hour. That's incredibly fast. Or so we would think. It has a 40,000 kilometer, that shouldn't be radius, that should be circumference. So the distance around our Earth, as we know it, is 40,075 kilometers. It has a mass of 5.9736 times 10 to the 24 kilograms. Now that number is kind of hard to appreciate, right? Because not many people know how to or what to associate a number with 24 digits behind it with. So continuing on, the average surface temperature of the Earth is about 14 degrees Celsius. So I want you to remember these numbers because this still isn't quite big enough for me. We're going to continue on, and I'm going to use this as a comparison to other things. So next, we'll look at a few of the other things around us because the Earth isn't that small in itself. And when we look at our solar system, we have other planets that the Earth is greater than. It's greater than Mercury, than Mars, than Venus, than Pluto, and all these other dwarf planets that nobody really ever knew about that exist and orbit around our sun in our solar system. So we limit ourselves to the 9 planets that we know of, but there's actually more than that. Some of these are deemed dwarf planets that you see listed here. One of them exists between us and our neighboring planet called Ceres, which isn't labeled on this diagram. But all those other ones that you saw exist out in what's called Kuiper's Belt, which is just outside of the orbit of Neptune and extends to just beyond, well, a little ways beyond the orbit of Pluto. So I'm just doing a quick review here on our solar system, our little bit of science review. Now, Kuiper's Belt is just a lot of debris and dust and stuff like that that forms a ring that goes around with the orbits of the planets of the Earth. Continuing on here, well, before I continue on, I'll save that for later. We'll keep going. Now, by far, Earth is not even close to the largest planet in our solar system. We have much larger planets than the planet Earth, such as Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. Jupiter is more than 11 times the size of our planet, and we could fit over 100,000 Earths inside of Jupiter. So that goes to show you how small Earth is, because this is a scale diagram of the size of the planets. Now, this isn't on scale as far as orbit is concerned, because they're all compressed in there, just so you can see them. But you can see how small Earth is compared to Jupiter there. I don't know can you guys all read that? That's clear and easy to read from the back there? Okay, great. So now we have something bigger to compare our Earth to, right? We have the planet Jupiter. So we stop and think, well, man, that's pretty big. 100,000 Earths in there, no problem. That's huge, right? But if you look just to the left, you'll see that there's still something much bigger that we can compare to. So let's keep going. Now, when God said in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, let there be light, right? I forgot to mention this point a few times back. When I mentioned the circumference, the distance around the Earth, 40,000 kilometers plus, the fastest thing known to man or created by man can travel at, does anybody know how fast? What our speed barrier is? 3,500 kilometers per hour. It's the Blackbird. It's a plane, a military plane. So the military plane, the Blackbird, could circle the Earth in just 11 hours. Could make it all the way around the Earth at its top speed in a time of 11 hours. But when we look at God's fastest piece of creation, and we compare it to man's fastest piece of creation, we see a startling difference. Because when God said in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, let there be light, light came bursting forth at the speed of 189,000 miles per second. Per second. I forget what it is in kilometers per hour. I think it's 1,080 million kilometers per hour. I'm pretty sure that that's it. Can you imagine 1,080 million kilometers per hour? I'm snapping my fingers roughly in 1 second intervals. Every time I do that, a beam of light has made it around the Earth 7 times. 7, 14, 21, 28. So that's how fast light is. 11 hours compared to 7 times in 1 second. Can you see how great the awesomeness of God is compared to man's greatest abilities or achievements so far? But we're still not there yet. We still haven't thought big enough yet. We haven't reached the limits of the awesomeness of God. And if we continue looking through His creation, we'll see even greater things. So, before I can continue, some of the things that we have mentioned here are measured in astronomical units. So what's an astronomical unit? An astronomical unit is about 149,598,000 kilometers. Now, how do you appreciate that huge unit? Last week, I think I mentioned this. If you were to count to 1 million consistently at the rate of 1 number per second, it would take 12 days, constantly day and night, to reach 1 million. If you continued counting, because you were really great and you wanted to go to 1 billion, it would take you 32 years to reach 1 billion. If you were really endeavorous and you wanted somebody to continue on for generations in your footsteps to make the greatest goal ever and count to 1 trillion, it would take over 4,000 years to count that high at the rate of 1 number per second. So you would have had to have started 2,000 years before the birth of Yeshua until now to reach 1 trillion. So I'm trying to show you how astronomical these numbers are. So, going back to the speed of light. If man were to try and travel at his fastest speed that he has in his fastest plane, which we talked about as a Blackbird, at 3,500 kilometers per second, from the sun to the outer planet Pluto, which orbits our sun, it would take over 240 years, nonstop. Now, if we compare that to God's creation, the speed of light, it would take about 5 hours and 22 minutes. Pales in comparison. 5 hours and 22 minutes to travel 100,000 astronomical units. But that's not the outer limit of our solar system. Our solar system is actually much huger than that, because if you consider Or's spherical belt, the Kuiper belt, and Or's sphere, which is a sphere of particles and dust that surrounds and orbits our solar system, when you put all of that stuff in, the expanse of our solar system goes to an estimated 200,000 astronomical units. So 200,000 times this number is the size of the solar system that we live in. So now, are you trying or starting to see or get some idea of how great our God is? Because our solar system is not the only thing in the universe. And if you stop and think of it, if I was to bring back that slide of the planet there, where would you see yourself on that planet? Probably not, because the Earth is so huge compared to you. We're a speck. We're nothing. We're like dust on the face of the planet. There's no way you could even view yourself from space on the face of the Earth. But getting back to large things inside of our solar system, the sun. Now, the sun is 1.392 million kilometers in diameter. Diameter is the distance from one side to the other if we were able to go straight through. Okay, just a quick review for the younger people here as well. Now, the sun is about 150 million kilometers away from the Earth. Light can travel from the sun to the Earth in about 8 minutes and a couple of seconds. The mass of the sun is 333 times that of the 333,000 times that of the Earth. Just to show you how massive the sun is compared to the Earth. And the volume of the sun compared to the Earth is 1 1.3 million times greater than that of Earth. So you could fit 1.3 million Earths inside of the sun. And the temperature of the surface of the sun as compared to the Earth is 5,505 degrees Celsius. And that's not the hardest star out there. So we look at how huge the sun is compared to the Earth. Over here is somewhat of a little dot, I don't know if you can see that back there, which is the size of the Earth compared to the sun. Right now you can see it being engulfed by a solar flare. But that just goes to show you, solar flares occur on a regular basis off the face of the sun. The Earth is nothing compared to the sun. And we, compared to the Earth, are an even greater nothing. Are you starting to feel just a little bit small now? But that wasn't the greatest God could do. Because when we look at the sun, what classification of star is the sun? Does anybody know? A what dwarf? A dwarf is correct. Yeah, yellow. Very close though. So when we see David speaking and he says to God, I will praise you for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Look at how giant just our solar system is compared to man. Yet, God created us a beautiful and precious thing in his eyes and in his sight. It says in Matthew chapter 10, verse 30, that the hairs of your head are numbered. God knows the very number of the hairs on your head. Yet, compared to our solar system, you're nothing. But that still doesn't compare to the size of some of the things that God has created. Because when he looked at all these things, he said, it's good, but it's not that good. I think I can keep going. And he did. So we're looking now at a star called Rigel. Now we can find this star in the constellation called Orion. And this star is 64,000 times brighter than our sun. Its radius is 98 times larger than our sun. Now we're talking about the sun here, not the earth anymore. And temperature compared to the sun is more than twice of the sun. It's a searing 12,130 degrees Kelvin. Yeah, pretty hot. Now, the difference between Kelvin and Celsius is only about a number of 273. So if you subtract 273 from 1230, you get the amount of degrees in Celsius. So it's 11,900, a little bit less than 11,900 degrees Celsius. But still incredibly hot compared to our sun and compared to our Earth. Now, Rigel is one of the brightest stars out there. And it's the brightest star in the constellation Orion. If you look down here on the bottom corner, you'll see the star Rigel, found in the bottom corner of Orion there. Now, when God saw that, he's like, yeah, this is getting there now, but still not big enough. I think I can do better. So he did. In the top corner here, we see a star called what we know as Betelgeuse. Some people call it Betelgeuse. Proper pronunciation is Betelgeuse. So. Now this star, if we were to compare it, has a radius more than 1,000 times that of our sun. Its volume is over 1 billion suns. So remember how long I said it would take to count to 1 billion, right? It would take you about, what did I say? 32 years, was it, for a billion? That's right, yeah. 32 years to count to 1 billion. This star is now classified as a red giant in the star classifications. So we think red giant. Yeah, now we're talking. God's got some big stuff happening here. Well, unfortunately, not necessarily so, because in this diagram here, the sun is that little speck which I don't think you can see in the background, and it's probably a bit too big. This here is what I was talking about, Betelgeuse, And if you'll notice in the background, there is something yet bigger. So God looked at that and said, yeah, this is big, but still not big enough. I can do better than that. And he did. He created the big dog star, what we call Canis Majoris, or Canis Major. Now, if you'll see here in the bottom corner, that is the sun. Here we have a small portion of Canis Majoris. Can we compare it to the sun? Pretty much useless, because the amount of suns, or the mass that it outweighs the sun by, the numbers are unappreciable. We can't appreciate numbers that big. So I found diagrams instead to try and help you understand this. That little square there at the bottom is the equivalent of this picture here on the side. And if you see our sun here in the corner, now we can compare it roughly to the size of Canis Majoris. Are you getting an idea now of how awesome God is, or how great our God is? It says the heavens declare his glory. And when you start to look at these things, you can see how glorious his creation is. This is the biggest star that man knows of. This doesn't necessarily mean that it is the biggest star out there. And in a few years, we may discover that there are things even bigger compared to this star. And if you consider the expanse of our galaxy, when we start to look at the Milky Way, well, that star is just another one of these little specks that you see flying around here in our galaxy. We sit somewhere around here within the galaxy on this picture. Our solar system cannot be seen or viewed within that. The estimate of stars in our galaxy is in the trillions, high trillions. The estimate of galaxies in the universe is in the high billions. Yet it says that God, when he created the stars, that he calls them by name. Every one of those stars, he knows them by name. This expanse is just too much for us to fathom. We can't fathom, first of all, the size of our solar system at 200,000 astronomical units, which we saw is way over 150 million kilometers. That's just one astronomical unit. 200,000 of those. How do you fathom that distance? So when God said to Moshe, "No man can see my face and live," there was good reason for it. Because it says that his ways are much higher than our ways, and his thoughts higher than our thoughts. In some scriptures it says the foolishness of God is wiser than the wisdom of men. And when you see the greatness or the awesomeness of his creation, you can't even begin to think how he keeps track of it all. But it all spins and rotates and orbits at his command. And he knows everything that happens in there, to you and me. So now you have something that you can compare the awesomeness of God to. And when we stop to worship, or we stop to praise, and we use that word, awesome or great, and we say, how great is his name, just remember the galaxy that we live in. Remember the universe that he created. Remember the stars that shine every night that you look outside and you see. Because that was all made by his hand for you. And there's nothing that's too great for him, nothing that's too much for him to be able to handle or to bear. So when we're feeling down or lonely or problems are encompassing us, or we're frustrated because of the trials of life, just remember the awesomeness of your God. And think of it, this problem compared to the size of the universe, absolutely nothing. Shabbat Shalom.